Second section of the test now to go over. And this time, it's all about solving. Now, the first thing you have to do is you really need to pay attention to what the directions say to do. Sometimes they say to factor and sometimes they say to solve. Going back to the previous section, there were questions like this, number 3 here, where kids actually solved them and said A equals. Well, this isn't equal to anything and it doesn't say solve, it says factor, so you just put the factors up there. Now it's saying solve, which means factoring is a step toward the solution, but it's not the whole solution in and of itself. Solve for n. The first thing we do with a quadratic, generally speaking, is we get it all on one side. And then we try the AM technique. In this case, I can multiply out to negative 24, add up to negative 5. That's n minus 8 times n plus 3. Maybe it's the guy on the left. Maybe it's the guy on the right. Add 8 to both sides. N equals 8. Subtract 3 from both sides. N equals negative 3. So the answers are negative 3 and 8. Honestly, a question like that should be so methodical at this point. It should be very comfortable for you. You've seen, by this point in time, you've probably seen 150 of them, maybe 200. Okay. Number 8. 7x squared minus 9x equals 0. And I see so many kids struggle with this question, yet it's easier than the previous question. What do you do before you cross the road? Look both ways. What do you do before you do a quadratic equation or factor a quadratic equation? You look for a common factor. In this case, there is a common factor. It's x. So I get x times 7x minus 9 equals 0. Maybe it's the guy on the left. Maybe it's the guy on the right. So I need to add 9 to both sides. I get 7x equals 9, divide by 7, and I get x is equal to 9/7. Now, as far as what goes in the answer space goes, you have to make sure that you put both answers, 0 and 9/7. Sometimes kids leave off the 0. Practice those. And again, there's a whole section in Extra Help on Demand about factoring quadratics. You will see questions like this in there. Next, what are the roots of y equals x squared minus x minus 20? Now, when it says what are the roots, you could actually go to the calculator and see where it crosses the x-axis. Or you could just realize that roots and zeros are the same thing, so just make it equal to 0 and factor. Calculator is probably quicker, but you should know how to do it algebraically as well. Again, notice, all I do is factor, and then I set each one equal to 0. The theory being that when I factor it and I get to this step, this thing times this thing, each of these factors, is 0. I don't know which one of them is 0, but the only way to make 0 multiplying is one of them or both have to be 0. Maybe it's the guy on the left, maybe it's the guy on the right, the x plus 4. And I solve them out, I get 5 and negative 4. Next, use the quadratic formula to solve the equation. Well, the first thing you have to do is know the quadratic formula, which for the most part we're pretty good at. And then you need to know what A, B, and C are. A is the number in front of the x squared, B is the number in front of the x, and the C is the number at the end. Just plugging them all in, I get x equals the negative of negative 6, which is 6, plus or minus the square root of, make sure you put it in parentheses, negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4. All over 2 times 1 is, I should put a 1 there, 2 times 1. So x equals 6 plus or minus. And you know, it's probably easiest to just put this right in the calculator, but as always, you must remember to put parentheses around a negative number when you're going to square it in a calculator. So that's going to be 36 plus 16, which is 52, over 2. So x equals, now I got to break down the square root of 52. So I ask myself, what's the biggest perfect square that divides into 52? It is 4. I don't know if I have a video up on Extra Help on Demand about simplifying radicals. If I don't, I need to get one up there. X equals 6 plus or minus. Now the square root of 4 is 2. So 2 radical 13 over 2. Now there were a number of people on the test who left it like this, but you can't. You have to divide the 2 into each of them. So I get x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 13. And that is the correct answer. That's about as hard as it's going to get with a quadratic equation formula in this particular course. And the next one says, Kenny's unable to graph, or he graphs that function. He wants to find all the zeros, find them in simplest radical form. So, again, x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I realize some of this is off the screen, but a is a half. You can look on your paper. B is 0. That's the big thing to keep in mind, because it says 1/2 x squared. Oh boy. Let me just do this for a minute here. 1/2 x squared minus 5. So a is a half, b is 0, because it's literally as if it says 0x here, and c is negative 5. So plugging it all in, I'm going to get x is equal to, hold it, I got to move this back a little bit, somehow I lost track of where it was. There we go. X is going to equal the negative of 0, which is just 0, plus or minus the square root of 0 squared is 0, minus 4 times 1/2 times negative 5 all over 2 times a half. So x is going to equal 0 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 times a half times negative 5 is going to equal 10. All over 2 times a half is 1. But they said to simplify this or express it in simplest radical form. You can't stop here. First off, anything over 1 is itself, and 0 plus radical 10, 0 minus radical 10 is either plus or minus radical 10, or you could write plus radical 10 minus radical 10. Either way, this is a little bit quicker. It's the way I kind of expect to see it. All right, next one. Solve 4n squared plus 6n equals 8 by factoring. The only hitch with that is that we actually told you during the test you need the quadratic formula. So 4n squared plus 6n equals 8. Subtract the 8 to get it all on one side. 4n squared plus 6n minus 8 equals 0. Factor out the 2. 2n squared plus 3n minus 4 equals 0. And now the problem is that I can't factor that. So we go to the quadratic formula. And I'm not going to write the formula again. I'm just going to start plugging it in. That's going to be negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 4 all over 2 times a is 2 times 2. Oh, that's not ready. So x will equal negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, now that's 9 and negative 4, oh this is, yeah, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times negative 2 is 32, and then, oh okay, 1 second here, that'll get me 41. I was hesitating because I didn't remember that answer from the sheet, but now I do. It could not be simplified. The answer, the final answer is x equals negative 3. It doesn't look like a negative there, but it is. Negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 41 all over 4. Okay? All right. So that's our second section on being good with quadratic equations. You'll notice that factoring in quadratic equations added up to a significant part of the test. It's such an important part of the unit or the year's work.